We're gonna talk about pain today. So definitely a very interesting topic. I had a chat with Dom and Cam before the call, and they just asked me to just make this quick, like 60-minute presentation on kind of like the neuroscience and a neuro view of pain. Because I feel like it's definitely something that if you look at the pain world, so to speak, like if you look at just how people view pain and how they see pain, I feel like there is a lot of misconceptions and like a lot of um like misinformation out there still. A lot of it actually comes from like just outdated information when it comes to pain, because a lot of people still have this very much so, I would say, like classic view of pain in terms of, okay, if you have pain there must be something wrong necessarily, on a tissue level, on a structural level. And if we just look at, like the neuroscience findings, or just in general, like the pain science findings of the last 10-20 years, there's a lot that has changed when it comes to like the viewpoint how we see pain. So we're definitely going to dive deeply into that today and just address some of these topics. And I'm just basically having the following goals, because I always like to set goals with my presentations and with the stuff that I do. So first of all, I want to give you clarity in terms of like why understanding brain specifically from a neuro perspective is key, because we can view it from a biomechanical perspective. We can kind of like view it from a more so physiological perspective, so inflammation, all these types of things, but it basically all comes down to the brain when it comes to pain. And I really want to give you a deeper understanding why that is and why it's probably so important to just change that perspective. Then I also kind of like want to give you a more confidence how to implement some of the drills that I'm going to share with you into the work. I also just want to show you some studies, some interesting findings from the world of neuroscience and pain science, because there is a lot of interesting data, a lot of interesting studies that have come out in the last 10-20 years. And then obviously I want to help you apply that knowledge and just, obviously become the best coach. I guess we're only having coaches on here, no therapists. So my goal is to help you guys just up your quality with your athletes or with your clients. And basically, like, we're gonna first dive into why focusing on the nervous system in the first place is so important. Then we're gonna define what is pain. So like, what is pain actually on a on like what does it do? Like, how does it work? What are the mechanisms behind it? Why do people experience pain? Like, where does it start? And I think that is just going to be something that is going to be very, very, very important to discover and dive into. Then we're also going to talk about what can we actually do to improve pain. So what are some of the mechanisms, some of the strategies, some of the ideas that we can have to just basically like just step by step improve pain. But also, I'm really big on the communication with my clients, because I feel like that part is really, really important. So like you have kind of like this neurological aspect of pain, but then I always say we are all psychologists to a certain degree, as coaches, as therapists. So like, we always work with humans, and humans, their mind and just their thoughts and beliefs are so powerful, specifically when it comes to pain. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have already worked with athletes or clients where, I don't know, they had this horror diagnosis from a doctor, like from a therapist, and like they've been told whatever, like they can't do sports anymore, they can't do this and they can't do that. And I definitely want to just teach you guys how to kind of make that like not the narrative, and help you find better words when you're working with clients, because that's going to be really, really important. And then last but not least, we're gonna then dive into some practical examples and some easy neuro drills. I mean, they're like, it's hard to say, okay, we're gonna pick specific drills that are gonna help with pain, because what you're gonna learn is pain is very complex, and it's gonna be very like individual, like how the individual is gonna like respond to pain. But we can work a lot on different inputs. And if you learn one thing from today, it's probably that pain is an output and highly depending on the quality of your input that your brain receives. Okay, so that is going to be something that is going to be really important for you guys to understand. And that will also explain why, you know, doing things like vision drills or breathing drills or vestibular or balance drills can actually help some people improve their pain symptoms. And because like that's something that even from more advanced students that I have in my program, like they still sometimes don't really know, like, why exactly can we improve pain when we improve vision, for example. And this is something that I definitely want to point out and clarify by today. All right, so let's first talk about why we should focus on the brain in the first place. And the reason why is, if you look at neuroscience, if you look at some of the studies that have been done in the neuroscience field, neuroscience just has absolutely exploded in the last 20 years. All right, and like that happened in a lot of different areas of neuroscience, like cognitive, behavioral neuroscience, but then also pain neuroscience. Okay, like we have all these like sub departments of neuroscience, and pain neuroscience is almost like a topic on its own, and there has been a lot of great and interesting studies done there. And if we just look at some of the numbers, or let's first talk about why the brain is so important and what the brain controls. I mean, we probably all know this, but it's just something sometimes we just have to remind ourselves, because sometimes we can get so caught up with focusing on the little details that we forget to really zoom in into into the actual human and into the actual, you know, mechanisms, what pain actually does. And when we think about it, the brain controls how we move. So like the brain controls mobility, flexibility, muscle tone, muscle tension. And this is also something when we're talking about mobility, flexibility, and how well somebody is able to move with training or with stretching. Yes, we're sort of working locally on, you know, let's say the hips or the ankle or the back or the shoulder. But actually what we're doing is we are working out the nervous system. So we're working out the brain, and we're trying to improve brain function in order to allow us to move better. And what's happening here, just on a mobility level or a flexibility level, is that we're actually just changing muscle tone and muscle tension that is actually controlled by the brain. Okay, we have a lot of these different brain areas, for example, like the brainstem or the cerebellum, that are in charge of that muscle tone. Okay, and muscle tone is literally the most important aspect when it comes to how tense or how loose a muscle is. Okay, and that's just something that we always have to remind ourselves of. And that's also the reason why, you know, when we're doing some neuro drills, like for example, some cerebellum drills or some vestibular drills, why oftentimes this muscle tension, like the tension that the brain holds, oftentimes changes. And, you know, sometimes when people can just move better, they can also feel better. Why? Because they're going to feel safer in that area. So that is just something that I think is really important to wrap your head around. Then obviously the way we feel is controlled by the brain, the way we think, our mental states, our thoughts, beliefs, like these are all things that are going to be important. And then obviously also performance. And I just had this discussion just an hour ago with an athlete that was here that I just worked with. And he's kind of had a rough year this year. And you know, he had some issues with his shoulder and with his foot, and it was kind of a pain in the ass because he worked with a physio, and the physio for 6 months just basically did nothing else but doing like rotator cuff exercises. So like he had some shoulder issues. He's a tennis player. He had some shoulder issues, some, just some impingement is what they call it. And like he obviously, like, that affected him mentally, but it also affected his performance. So what basically I was trying to tell him was, your brain will obviously not going to let you perform at your highest level when subconsciously it will always feel like there's something going on in the body. Okay. And like he had some issues with his big toe, or like his third toe, and then he had some issues with his shoulder. And these are all the things that are obviously going to plague an athlete and going to make things harder and going to make just things worse for them to perform at their highest level. So in order to actually perform at the highest level, our goal should always be that we can help people move better and also move pain-free, because again, the brain will then restrict or kind of like hold back the truest performance potential that they actually have. Okay. And that's again why just focusing on the brain is really, really important. So we have all these reasons to focus on the brain. And that is also why I always say that the brain is boss, and you definitely want to focus on the brain, the nervous system, with anything that you do with your clients and with your athletes. And this is actually something that I pulled up here, which I think is always quite interesting to see, just like the sole number of studies that have been done in the neuroscience field. So if we look at the year 2002, so that's just on PubMed, just type in the word neuroscience, you're going to find approximately like 7,000 results on neuroscience, and now we almost have 60,000. So like we almost had like a tenfold increase in the number of studies done per year in the neuroscience field, which is actually really interesting. And like I said, of course, there's a lot of studies that are not interesting for our field. However, there's going to be a lot of studies that are going to be interesting for our field. So like there's a lot of studies that are really interesting to look at and to discover. And that is why, a lot of the beliefs have changed around pain. And, people are slowly but surely trying to catch up with what is going on with the brain in relationship to pain. And like we're kind of understanding how pain works at a deeper level. Which is great because, like the way you can use that for your own good as a coach is very powerful. And yeah, I think it's definitely something that always blows my mind when you just pull up the studies. And I mean, obviously, like I'm an educator with Neurotraining Institute, and like, to be perfectly transparent and honest, sometimes it can be really just so frustrating and time consuming to dive into like these neuroscience based studies, because it can be quite complicated just because of the sole number of studies that have been done. But at the same time, it's a blessing because we have so much more information than we had just 5 years ago, right? Like if you just compare what we have found in the last 5 years, that's already mind blowing. So it's an ongoing process, and like we can never know enough about the brain. Like I don't know everything about the brain, like no chance. And I feel like nobody can know everything about the brain. It's impossible. And like even science, like we're not at a place or a position where we can know everything about how the brain works, but we can get ideas. We can get ideas, and we can have just certain strategies that we can use for our clients. And just to circle back a little bit in terms of helping you understand the brain better, because I know a lot of you are very much so new to neurotraining, or what neurotraining actually is. And the best way how you can just sort of imagine how and why some of the things are working so well that we do here at Neurotraining Institute is if we circle back and we just think about what the brain actually does on a macro level. The brain will receive input. Okay, so right now, as you're listening to this, you're, for example, receiving auditory input. You're maybe getting visual input because you see me speak. You're seeing the presentation. It's also visual input at the same time. Your tactile receptors, if you're sitting, for example, and your glutes are going to send signals. Maybe your feet are going to send signals that they're on the ground. So you have all these different types of inputs that are happening, and your brain receives 24/7 and 365. And the way we can classify these inputs is actually into like three primary departments. One is called exteroception. So we receive input from the outside. This is, for example, again, like this example, visual. This is, for example, auditory. This could also be olfactory. So we smell things. And these are all the things, or like the inputs that are coming from the outside. Then we also have inputs that are coming from the inside of our body. So in neuroscience, we call that interoception. So that would be, for example, your brain perceiving that you're thirsty, or that you're hungry, or that maybe like, I don't know, maybe something would be off. For example, you ate something bad and you would have, you know, just some pains inside of your body. That would be interoceptive signaling. And then last but not least, we have proprioception. So we have that input of our brain constantly managing and measuring where our body is in space. So this is going to be obviously really important for movement and sports performance. I mean, there's a lot of talk about, you know, proprioception training and trying to improve it. And this is basically just when you, for example, close your eyes and you move your hand, like your brain knowing exactly where your hand is in space. Okay, so that's basically proprioception. And these are the three primary inputs that our brain receives. So this is going to happen in the first step. Okay, this is happening all the time, again, 24/7, 365, even when you're sleeping. In the second step, our brain, and this happens obviously like very fast. So like this happens literally within milliseconds. Okay, we take these inputs and we process them in different brain areas. And here we can talk about the three primary areas. So we have, for example, if I show you this little brain model here, I don't know if you can see me. Let me just pin myself here real quick so I can see myself too. Okay, so we have in this case, just go back, we have the cerebrum. So the cerebrum is basically here the cerebral cortex with all the different brain areas, including the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. So we have all these different brain areas that all have different functions. Okay, so we have, again, for example, the frontal lobe, which is involved in executive functions, decision making, voluntary movement. Okay, we have the parietal lobe, which, for example, processes sensory information, processes proprioception, processes a lot of different things that are going to be important for us to feel things and to perceive things. Okay, then we have the temporal lobe, which is this yellow part here, which is going to be a brain area that is, for example, more so involved in language, speech, also memory, also things like, for example, auditory processing. Smell is also governed by the temporal lobe. So we have all of these different lobes. And then obviously we have the occipital lobe, which is primarily processing our visual input. Okay, so we have all these different brain areas dedicated towards perceiving input and actually processing input. Okay, we have also the cerebellum, which is this little part here, which is going to be a really interesting area, because the cerebellum, although it only makes up 10% of our brain's volume, it actually has 50% of the total amount of neurons in the brain. So it is a very densely packed brain area that is going to be really important for a lot of different functions. Okay, coordination of movement, again, spatial awareness, even things like balance. So we have a lot of different things that are going on in the cerebellum. And then obviously we also have this little part down here, which is the brainstem. So the brainstem actually is going to be really important for example, a lot of our autonomic processes, things like breathing, things like posture, muscle tone, things like heart rate. Okay, so a lot of our reflexive actions actually happen on this like brainstem level. And where I'm going with this, why am I showing this to you, is because I want to show you that the inputs that we receive, they're all gonna be going to these different brain areas here. Okay, we have all these different tracts of our nervous system that basically connect, for example, the eyes with the brains via the optic nerve. Okay, we have, for example, like our different tactile receptors that are going to be connected from our skin with, for example, the parietal lobe or the cerebellum. Okay, so we have all these different connections, and our brain constantly receives that input, processes that input, and then in the last step creates, based on these inputs, an output. Okay, and what do I mean by output? Output could be movement. Okay, we for example, we hear something. So right now, for example, we have a storm right now here in Florida. If I, for example, hear a loud noise of something falling down, I probably would have some reflexive actions in terms of movement that will prevent me or like try to protect me from potential danger. Okay, or if you're an athlete, you see something, you see a ball coming towards you, and you're like, okay, I better, I don't know, kick that ball if you're a soccer player. So your brain, your visual system sends it to the occipital lobe, sends it to the cerebellum, to the brainstem, and based on that, you're then gonna start a movement plan in the frontal lobe, and then you're basically gonna move your body. Okay, so this is just basically how the brain works on a macro level. And the most important thing, since we're talking about pain here in this presentation, the most important thing that I want you to understand is that pain is an output. Okay, so we can think about this whole thing here and view pain a little bit differently. Okay, so your brain will decide, specifically when it comes to chronic pain. Okay, when we're talking about acute pain, so let's say, for example, I have a toothpick here, all right, and I'm stabbing my hand. This would actually stimulate specific receptors called nociceptors, which are quote unquote pain receptors. And my brain, my parietal lobe, would actually process that as pain signals. Okay, but what does it happen? What would happen, for example, in chronic back pain? Do we really have these nociceptors constantly being active, or is it something that the brain almost produces on its own and just sends pain signals to the lower back in terms of an output? Okay, and this is actually what happens most of the times when it comes to chronic pain type situations, specifically with people that had all the testing done. So I mean, I work a lot with people in pain, so oftentimes they show me all their test results, all the things that they've MRIs, whatever, and some people are telling me they haven't found anything. So the question is there really a structural damage, or is it all happening on a neural level? And that's just something to really wrap your head around. We're going to talk about that in greater detail in just a second. Okay, but this is the most important thing that you have to understand. Based on the input that we receive and the processing in the brain areas, a brain is going to start making an output based on these informations. Okay, and then we have things like posture, we have thoughts, these are all output driven behaviors and actions. Okay, and here's where I really want you to just pause for a second and just look at this. And you want to think about, if, for example, your brain doesn't receive high quality, let's say, for example, vestibular input. Okay, so your vestibular system sits in your inner ear, and it's basically your body's own balancing system. And that vestibular system constantly measures if you're in motion or not. And let's say that vestibular system doesn't send high quality signals to the brain. Your brain will perceive that as a threat. Okay, your brain will feel weird. Your brain will feel like there's something going on that it doesn't like. So what happens? Your brain, in the different brain areas, is then going to decide, hey, I don't feel safe. We have to do something here. So then eventually it will create a pain signal. Specifically, for example, with the vestibular system, oftentimes you will have things like dizziness, nausea, where people, almost feel like they have to vomit. And the best example for that is, for example, when you're driving a car, and you, for example, look at your phone. Let's say you're in the passenger seat and you look at your phone, and you all of a sudden I don't know, feel weird. That is because your brain receives visual input that you're not in motion. So you're looking at a static picture, but your vestibular system senses that you're in motion. So now your vestibular system is like, your brain is like, okay, I have two different inputs. So I'm not feeling safe. So let me just, make you feel nauseous. Let me make you feel pain. Let me make you feel threatened. Because guess what? Pain is a great warning signal of the brain that something is wrong in your body. Okay. And this is something that is probably one of the most important things that you have to take away from this presentation here, is that the brain, all the brain really cares about is making you feel safe and helping you survive. The brain doesn't care about if you have back pain. The brain doesn't care about if you're, I don't know, like if you want to perform at a high level at your sport. The brain doesn't care about all of these things. All the brain cares about is surviving and staying alive. Okay. And if that means that maybe the brain sends pain signals into the shoulder because the brain doesn't feel safe when you're doing all these weird, whatever, shoulder flies or presses, that will be a great way of the brain actually telling you, hey, I don't want you to do this. So I'm just going to send some pain signals here because I'm not safe in that area. Okay. And that actually is oftentimes how pain works on a brain level. It's just literally a great warning signal of your brain telling you, hey, I don't like you doing this. I don't want you to do this. Okay. And what's really important is, again, this is just a system. It's like a 3-step system. And the most important thing that I want you, again, to take away from this is pain is an output. Okay, we receive input, we integrate that input, and then based on that integration and based on that input, we create an output. In that case, that will be pain. Okay, so what's going to be really important to understand a lot of the concepts that we're going to use, because we're going to focus a lot on the inputs of the body. Okay, we're going to focus on vision, we're going to focus on vestibular function, we're going to focus on tactile input, proprioceptive input, interoceptive input, is that your brain will receive that input anyways. Okay, so now you just have to ask yourself, how can I improve that quality of that input? Okay, how can I improve the quality of the input that my brain actually receives? Because the quality of input matters. Okay, and the best example that I can give to you guys here is imagine you're playing a piano. Okay, so I guess every one of us could play the piano, right? We could just, play the keyboard, but it matters what keys you're pressing. Okay, so for example, in that case, you give a lot of input by pressing the keys, but the end result, what's going to happen is going to be horrible because it's going to sound like crap, right? And this is the same with the brain. If you're actually focusing on the quality of input, what keys am I pressing? What am I actually doing? That will obviously give you a better end result. Okay, in that case, that will be, okay, you can move better, you can move pain-free, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so that's going to be too important to think about. And we're not just talking about, visual input here. We can talk about, the eyes. We can also talk about different nerves in the body. The peripheral nervous system is going to play a massive role. It's also something that I'm focusing a lot on in my work. So I focus a lot on the different peripheral nerves in the body. So for example, somebody has elbow pain, I would focus, for example, on the ulnar nerve. Somebody had shoulder pain, I would probably focus more on the axillary nerve. So I focus a lot on these different nerves as well, because these are all going to be important inputs that the brain perceives. Then we have the inner ear. Again, this is our vestibular systems, our body's own balancing system. The body senses that we're constantly in motion. And a funny example, it's not that funny, but it's actually a very interesting case. There is a condition that some people have when they go on cruise ships. So cruise ships, big cruise ships, that when they get off of the cruise ship, some people still, sometimes months, sometimes years after they get off the cruise ship, they still feel their emotion. And this would be a great example for the brain perceives a weird type of input that is not really true. Okay, and that leaves the brain constantly in a state of threat, in a state of danger. And guess what's going to happen? The brain is going to send some weird warning signals, whether that's feeling constantly dizzy, feeling pain, feeling constantly like fatigued, constantly having negative thoughts, survival thoughts. Like these are all things that the brain is then gonna, just obviously do in order for you to change something. Again, pain is a great warning and behavior change signal. We have different receptors. So for example, also like the receptors in our skin are going to be really important. How many times have you heard somebody talk about, okay, you have knee pain? Have you ever looked at the local tissue of the knee? Okay, has anybody ever addressed that with you? Like this is something that most of the times is the way I start my work with clients, is not on the motor side of things, but actually on the sensory side, because I know that probably nobody has ever really addressed that. Yes, they might have, massaged that area in like a physical therapy session, or they might have got some manual work done. But for example, have they ever tested how well the brain actually is able to feel that area? How well the brain is actually aware of that area, because that all is going to matter a ton when it comes to the brain. So bottom line, better input will improve output better. Like less pain, better posture, more strength, more speed. Okay, so we can use all that knowledge that we have about, all these different types of input, visual, vestibular, proprioceptive, and not use it in the context of pain, but also use it in the context of performance. And this is something I talk about a lot, because I'm a fanatic when it comes to athletes and sports. If you just look at the best of the best, the MJs, the Messis, like just the best of the best, you will notice that, yes, they might have, athleticism, but you have a lot of athletes in this world that are actually athletic. But what really separates the best from amateurs is their neurological skills. The best athletes, they can just process information quicker, make better decisions, have better vision, they can read the game better, and they just have these neurological advantages. And that's what I am focused on a lot with my athletes, because obviously you want to give them an unfair advantage to their competitors, and focusing on a lot of these inputs and the neurological skills is going to be really important. All right, so let's look at some studies here, because I feel like it is really important to understand pain and to understand where pain is coming from, what affects pain, and like what we can do. Okay, and this is a really interesting study which was done in 2019, so fairly new study. And they looked at all the different aspects and all the different influences that pain can basically be dependent on. Okay, and as you can see here, we have mechanical factors, we have tissue damage, we have people that are not sleeping well, we have all these different emotional factors that come into play. We have obviously like age being a factor, beliefs being a factor, their work environment being a factor. So we have so many different influences that affect pain. And basically what they found in that study and in multiple other studies is that pain is always multi-dimensional. And this might sound a little bit weird because you're like, wait, but what if somebody has some real damage, let's say in their discs or in their meniscus? Like, are you telling me like that's not real? That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that if you look at some of the studies that have been done in people with tissue damage, you will always find a large number of people that don't have any symptoms, which is so interesting, right? Like, I mean, if you think about it, if you, let's say, take 10 people and you put 10 athletes in an MRI, and you find that 7 out of 10 have some low grade, whatever, herniated discs or meniscus tears or microfractures, whatever it is, you will always find, let's say from these 7 people, you will always find a larger percentage, let's say like 3 or 4 people that wouldn't feel the pain. And this is again where this multi-dimensional lens of pain comes into play, because like you will always have multiple reasons why the brain will perceive pain. And the most important thing that I want you to understand here with that framework is you don't have to fix all of these areas, because I feel like that's a lot of times what people would get wrong when they see this. They're like, holy crap, like I need to improve all of these areas of my life in order to be pain-free. No, like you just have to probably focus on a few of these areas here. And, you know, sometimes you can identify that with your clients when you just ask them the right questions. And you can find out that, you know, maybe XYZ is a big problem for them. And I still believe that, for example, biomechanics are going to be really important, because one of the biggest stressors of your brain is actually managing gravity. And it's also, you know, going to determine where you hold tension in the body. But then you also have all these, like, you know, biopsychosocial factors that are listed here that are going to affect the brain, right? So like, for example, for me, I know that I hold a lot of tension, for example, in my lower back area, just because of my posture and years of lifting heavy. And for example, for me, when I get stressed, which doesn't happen a lot, luckily, but most of the times when I'm really stressed is when I fight with my wife, which luckily, thank God, doesn't happen too often now either. But when I do fight with my wife, I always develop back pain. Always. No exception to the rule. Okay. Always have back pain. And yeah, I could think about now, okay, like think about the psychological things, which, you know, obviously it's not a big deal. We're married, you know, you fight things through and you discuss things. But on a biomechanical level, I could also focus on, you know, how can I actually help maybe reduce some of that tension? And I could do that again by, you know, doing specific exercises, specific drills. But then I can also focus on completely different areas. I could focus on, for example, my vision, okay? Because vision is our most dominant sensory input system. So if our brain perceives that it can't observe what's happening in the environment well, our brain also will feel this, you know, constant level of threat, okay? And that's also why sometimes when you focus on the visual system and focus on improving vision with athletes or with people in pain, oftentimes they will feel so much better, just because all of a sudden their brain perceives, oh my God, like I feel so much safer because I can just see my environment better. I feel more guarded just because I receive better visual input. And we can, again, just transfer that over to all the different other input systems. Okay. And this is something, again, that I would just want you to keep in mind, that we're always dealing with pain as a multi-dimensional issue, and something that usually happens because of more than just one reason. And this is basically what the study found. Which also leads us to the next example, which are sham surgeries. Okay, so like you'll find a lot of studies on that. It's basically oftentimes being used to actually observe specific treatments if they really work or not. So it's basically like a placebo surgery to figure out, okay, is a treatment that we're using working or not? It's basically the same thing as saying, okay, like we have this supplement here and we give it to 10 people and 50% are going to really get the real supplement and 50% are going to basically get a water pill. This is the same thing that they do with these sham surgeries, okay? And with sham surgeries, it's basically, I mean, some of them are more complex, but just to put it into a very simple, words, what they're doing is, let's say they having, again, let's just make easy numbers here. Let's say you're taking 10 people with knee pain, and all of these people were told to get surgery. And what we're doing here is we're gonna do a real surgery. So in that case, they did arthroscopic surgery for osteoarthritis of the knee. So in 5 people, we're really gonna do the treatment. And in the other group, we're just gonna open the knee, close it again, do nothing else, but just put people into like anesthesia, and that's it. And oftentimes what you will see with these sham surgeries is that a large percentage of the people that didn't get any of the treatment will be symptom-free after the surgery. So they're like, oh, like it worked. Yeah, the surgery worked really well for me. And this is basically what these sham surgeries are doing. Of course, these people, you know, they are having the studies done on them. They know that they're also maybe in the sham group. But it just basically shows you, like sometimes we're just telling people, hey, we're gonna do something about it, whatever, you take this supplement or you do this, they're gonna feel better. And that's literally the power of placebo, right? And you know, people talk about placebo as something being bad. I don't think it's something bad. I just think it's something that we need to teach people how they can use it for their own advantage. Okay. So that's just something that I think is really fascinating. And I think these type of studies, like these type of like sham surgeries, they, like from my personal journey, they really opened my eyes when it comes to pain. And that's also why oftentimes with some of the clients that I work with, it also explains why they can have such fast results. And this is, you know, like just a lot of it comes back to their beliefs. A lot of it comes back to psychological factors. Of course, also what we're doing with, you know, working on the inputs will have an effect, but a lot of it is, you know, in their mind, which is really important to understand. So the main outline that I want to give you, that I really want you to understand when it comes to pain, is actually 3 main things. And like, this is the most important thing that you really have to take away from this presentation. Pain is an output by the brain. Okay, we've talked about that in great detail. Number 2, pain does not equal damage to tissue. Okay, so as you could see in that example with the sham surgeries, it does not always mean only because you're feeling pain. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something broken in your body. There's something broken in an area. Like, because that's what most people still think. That's what most people still to this day, they believe. When I have pain, I have some level of tissue damage, fractures, torn ligaments, whatever it is, they will think this is the root cause of their pain. Okay, and then, you know, like, you have doctors, you have physical therapists that still also believe this old view of pain, because this is how we viewed pain a long time ago. We thought, okay, pain equals damage, but pain does not equal damage, and that's important to understand. And then the third thing is pain is multifactorial. Okay, so we have all these different areas, all these different inputs, all these different, you know, aspects of people's lives that will affect somebody's pain production, pain intensity. So like, we have different areas in the brain that will manage all of that. Okay, so for example, the insular cortex, which is kind of like a subcortical area, which has a lot to do with, you know, just emotions and processing. the insular cortex actually will regulate the pain intensity. Okay, and like when we look at the insular cortex, we know that the insular cortex is deeply connected to all of these different brain areas. So again, like what happens here is also going to affect the insular cortex and the amount of pain that we actually perceive. Okay. So this is going to be really important for you to understand that, like, when we're talking about pain, when we're talking about these different areas, our brain literally has the capabilities of healing itself. And I don't want this to sound hippie or anything, because like that's what you hear from a lot of people, like, yeah, you can just heal yourself, whatever. But there's a lot of truth to it. If you look at neuroscience research, if you look at, for example, even things like opioids, like our brain can produce its own opioids to help with pain reduction, right? And this is just something why when you focus on the right things, you can oftentimes see literally the human body healing on its own, which is fascinating to me. Okay, now what can we do to actually fix the pain? So now I hope you really understand what pain is, what affects it, but now let's be a little bit clearer in terms of what you can do. And the best analogy that I really like to give, and I use this with every single one of my pain clients that I work with, is the cup of water analogy. And the way I explain it to them is like, imagine you have like a cup of water. So now this cup is like half full, all right? And imagine this is the amount of stressors that your body can handle, okay, without having any symptoms. So when this flows over, your body, your brain will have symptoms, pain symptoms, fatigue symptoms, sleep issues, whatever it is. So now this cup is, half empty. But now what if I, fill more water up to a point where it completely spills over? This would be when I would probably develop some weird symptoms. And here's again how we can view this. We can view these different stressors as water, and we can view it as, okay, if we just, for example, like, let's say we just focus on these few things here that I've listed, okay? We can focus on maybe improving somebody's nutrition, improving somebody's sleep quality. We can focus on some of these sensory deficits, okay? Maybe local tissue or visual, vestibular, proprioceptive. We can focus on somebody's mobility issues, helping somebody move better. We can, for example, help somebody with stress management. So we can, like help them meditate, do breathing exercises with them. Okay, so let's say we're just focusing on some of these things. What's going to happen is the cup is going to be emptier. Okay, so this would be, we could protect the brain, we can protect that individual. Option number two is we make the cup bigger and we expose that person to more stress. And the beauty about that is that, like, people actually will adapt. So the human body, the human brain has this amazing ability to adapt to stressors. Okay, think about training. You're working out, lifting heavy weights, you're basically, just like causing damage. You're causing fatigue, but then guess what? Next time you go hit the gym, you're going to be stronger. Same thing happens, for example, with, let's say you're doing cold exposure. Okay, and the first time you hop in a cold plunge, it's probably going to be super hard. If you're doing it a year straight, it's still probably going to be uncomfortable, but maybe your tolerance has improved, right? So same thing with, let's say, aerobic training. You're you're starting to run miles. First time is not going to be the best time, but then if you're doing it over and over and over, your body is going to adapt. So these are basically the two options, really simply put. Because I like simplistic viewpoints. We can either empty the cup, which is dealing with protection of the brain and the body, or we can make the cup bigger, which means we can expose the system to more stress so we can then adapt. And ideally, it would probably be both, okay? So this is mainly what we can do with managing pain and managing, just the pain signals that somebody presents with. Okay. And of course, one thing that I definitely want to mention to you guys is, because I don't want you to get into trouble. Of course, when you're working with somebody and, they have shoulder pain and they have never seen whatever, like a doctor or something, like you definitely want to, get at least like you want to you kind of like want to rule out any severe damage to tissue. Okay, so if somebody legitimately has a whatever torn ligament, or for example, I just worked with a client that tore his meniscus snowboarding, and like in that case, like he needs surgery, because it's a very complicated like tear. In that case, well, probably making the cup bigger here is not the smartest idea. Okay, maybe in that case, like just emptying the cup, focusing on other things. Right now we're focusing a lot on, like the neuro aspects and the mindset and things like that, nutrition, but like it's not something that I would probably then expose too much. But then let's say he's finished with his surgery, and he's done a few basic things like riding a bike and like just slowly but surely progressing into movement, then we would have focused on exposing the body to more stress. Okay, so we can adapt to stressors. Okay, so I hope really this all opened your eyes a little bit more on how pain works and how you can view it, what you can do. Because like I said, I like simplistic views. And the most important thing that I want you to understand, like on these 3 key principles: pain is an output, pain does not equal damage, and pain is multifactorial. And there's a lot of things that we can do. And oftentimes, I really want to just put this message out there, is oftentimes people, they underestimate how fast they can actually get relief from pain and how fast some of these things can improve when you just focus on the right things. Okay, so I'm going to share just some few really simple neuro drills with you. I didn't really pick these drills specifically for pain. Okay, like these are just different drills for your toolbox. You can use them for pain, you can use them for performance enhancement with your clients. So they have a lot of functions, because obviously we can't get into like neuro testing and assessments, but I just want to like give you a few easy things for your toolbox. I mean, obviously if you're following me on Instagram, I share a lot of these different drills, and like in my seminars I talk more about actually like the assessment process, the programming, the different periodization kind of models that we can use with neurotraining, because it's neurotraining. The way I do it is it's actually a lot like strength training. We start at a certain point and then we're gonna progress and get better over time. So the first one that we're gonna do, and just to give you a little bit of explanation how you would want to use these drills, at least in that context, is I just want you to pick something that you want to improve. Okay, like that could be the easiest way how we can measure that would be like mobility. And the reason why is because mobility is actually usually a great measurement just to see how the nervous system responds globally. Okay, so when we look at just muscle tone in general, oftentimes when the brain feels good about something, the brain will allow more range of motion and will allow better movement. So that is something that oftentimes you would actually see with clients, that they will then just feel better in terms of their mobility and in terms of their movement. Okay, so this is the first step. You basically pick a movement or a skill that you want to improve, and then the first drill that we're going to do is just a basic pencil push-up. Okay, so let me just close this here real quick and just demonstrate this, how you could do this with either yourself or your clients. And you can always do this right now with me. So basically, for example, if we would want to, for example, improve someone's movement here, you could, for example, do a forward bend assessment. So you can just basically keep your legs straight and you just basically do this a few times, just to see how flexible you are. Okay, you can also, for example, do shoulder mobility. You can either do like just shoulder lateral flexion or internal rotation, external rotation, just basic shoulder flexion, whatever it is that you want to improve. With vision, I usually oftentimes test neck range of motion, which is Why? Because like the brain is connected to our neck muscle. The visual system is deeply connected to our neck muscles. So whenever we work on the eyes, we can oftentimes also see improvements in neck range of motion. So one thing that you could, for example, also do is just do some basic rotation or lateral flexion. And you just want to see, okay, how far can you go? And then what we're doing with the pencil push-up is we're just basically, oh, sorry, I'm just getting a call here, client here. What it is, what we're doing with the pencil push-up is we're just literally, as the name applies, doing a pencil push-up. So what you're gonna do is we're gonna just sit, focus on the target with both eyes, and then you're gonna bring it to the nose, and then you're gonna go back. Okay, there's a lot to uncover here, but I just want you to keep the focus on the target. At a certain point, it will get blurry. Okay, and I just want you to just do this for about 5 to 10 reps. What you're gonna see with when you're doing this with your clients, with your athletes, you're gonna see all types of weird things happen sometimes with eyes, like just eyes not converging well. Maybe one eye is just focusing on it, and we can't really get too much into that today, but that's definitely something you'll see. And then you can just basically retest, okay, how does that actually make that person move? Okay, so again, we could do forward bend, we could do the reassessment of the neck. And for example, for me, it always works really well when I just get the eyes to move, because I'm working a lot on the computer. So, you know, just like constantly have the eyes focused like on one specific range of motion, and then just getting the eyes to move oftentimes just will help the brain feel more relaxed. Okay, so I mean, we could get into the neurology, why this happens, and you know, like we talk about all the cranial nerves that are involved here, and all the, you know, like the midbrain and all of that stuff. But what I just want you to take away from this again is kind of like that better input, better output loop, that when you're focusing on the visual input or like just input in general, you're gonna ultimately or eventually see improvements in the output. Okay, so just simple examples. So this is the first drill that I want to share. The second one that I prepared was actually a vestibular drill. So the vestibular system, again, is going to be a really important system for balance and if like detecting movements, if our body is moving or not. And what we're going to do here is I want you to actually test your you can test your squat range of motion. Like this works really well for squat, believe it or not, because our body is kind of like in that vertical plane of range of motion. So we can, you know, we're going up and down. And one thing that gets not talked about a lot is that when we're going up and down, that is actually a specific area of the vestibular system measuring that up and down movement, which is called the saccule. Okay, so it's part of the two otolith organs, which measures vertical movement. And oftentimes, when you can just stimulate that system a little bit, you can oftentimes see immediate improvements in the way somebody can control their squat. Or, for example, we can also see improvements in vertical jump. Okay, so like I do this. I'm big into basketball, so I like dunking, I like jumping high. So I do this, for example, as part of my warm-up every time I step on a basketball court. Okay, so what you can do here, and I'm just going to use the camera as a target for my eyes. So like my eyes are focused on the green light on the laptop. So I'm just focusing on the target. It needs to be a very small target that you can focus on. And then while you keep the really like sharp focus on the target, you're just gonna start bouncing up and down. Okay, you're just gonna do that. You can even make this faster, and you really want to make sure that you're sharply focused on the target, because that is also a vestibular reflex kicking in that's going to allow us to keep the focus. For some people, it makes them feel a little bit dizzy. For me, it actually makes me feel quite good, just because we're really getting active. And then you can retest your squat and just see if it improves. And like for me, it works really, really well. You can again test other things too, but I just figured that just vertical movements are really great to retest. Okay. The third one that I had is just a very simple breathing drill, actually, that I just want to share with you. Nothing too fancy, nothing too crazy. But I want you to think about breathing also being it is an output, but it is also an input. Okay, so it's like kind of like 2 in 1, because the way we can change our breath is going to affect the nervous system. And specifically, for example, if you focus on longer exhales than inhales, that's going to be more parasympathetic in nature. So it's actually going to be more relaxing to our system in nature, which is why, specifically when you're dealing with people in pain, you will often see amazing results when you're actually cueing them to breathe well, and just just including some breathing techniques. And since I personally really like to combine, kind of like the biomechanics and the neurology, one thing that you can do here, and this would actually be something where you can test somebody's shoulder range of motion, internal rotation, external rotation. This is probably going to work a little bit better for internal rotation of the shoulder, because we're actually trying to like open up the front side of the shoulder, as well as using a specific breathing rhythm to allow the nervous system globally to relax. Okay, so what we're going to do here is you need a book for that, and I want you to just get into this like prone position with the elbows slightly bent. The lower back is not arching like this, it's kind of stacked, so like the pelvis is slightly kind of like this posterior tilt. Okay, and what I just want you to test is actually that arm that is elevated. I want you to retest your shoulder mobility. So first I want you to test your shoulder mobility. So you could, for example, do that case. You could do like an internal rotation measurement. So you can just go here and just see, okay, how good is my internal rotation? Okay, mine is horrible today because I already worked out. It's a little bit stiff. So that would be a great measurement to see if you can improve it. And then what I want you to do is I just want you to get into this position. And now, while actually pressing with the inside, so again, this is all inputs, okay? Sensory inputs, tactile inputs. We're pressing with the inside of our hand, so that the thumb and the index finger are pressing into the ground. And now we're just trying to breathe in for 3 seconds into the nose, and for 5 seconds out through the mouth. Again, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then what I really want you to focus on is, again, the contact of the thumb and the index finger. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. And same thing one more time. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Okay. And we can retest. And for me, I mean, breathing always works really well. So like, this is really money for me. I'm not complete. I mean, if I really want to force it, I can come all the way down to the ground, but like, it definitely loosened up extremely on that side. Okay, and this is a great drill to on the one hand side, just really stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, just reduce muscle tension, reduce muscle tone, and then like using some of the biomechanics measures here with internal rotation, as well as like increasing the anterior rib cage here, just like expanding everything, which is something that is really, really effective. Okay. And then let me just quickly check which other drill I had. So we had breathing. Oh yeah, then we have something more on the sensory side. So what I want you to just pick here is actually use a scar, or maybe if you have tattoos, you go to a tattoo that you have. Okay. So for example, I have a scar like right here on my arm. Okay, so I have a scar right here, small scar, and this is going to be really interesting because this is again something that works more on the tactile side of things, so the sensory input. But oftentimes what you see when you're working on somebody's skin is that will be a game changer sometimes for some people's mobility. And the reason why is because oftentimes when you have former injuries, which a scar is a former injury, a tattoo is a former injury, oftentimes what you will see in that area is that, and I'm going to just use layman's terms here, you're going to have overactive nociceptive action, so like overactive threat and pain receptors in that area. So oftentimes what will happen, the brain doesn't feel safe in that area, so it will restrict movement, sometimes locally, but sometimes also globally. So what we need to do is we need to send a different input to exactly that area in order for the brain to feel that there's nothing bad or nothing threatening here. Okay, because the brain only can really perceive one type of sensory input from the skin. Okay, again, in very simple terms. But for example, what happens if you hit yourself? Like, say you hit your elbow. What's the first thing that you do? You're holding your elbow. Okay, why? Because you're actually producing pressure signals that the brain, like that the receptors, that the tactile receptors here will actually perceive, and the pressure that you're applying will actually reduce the nociceptive action, at least for a few seconds while you apply the pressure. Okay, so this is something that we're kind of doing here, but in a more specific way. And what I recommend you do, just get a little toothpick. Okay, so we're actually using nociception to fight nociception, which is quite interesting. And it's also why a lot of times things like acupuncture work really well, because people, you're actually sending a nociceptive signal to an area. And for a lot of people, this can actually help them because they feel pain, but then they also like feel like, hey, it's a very like pleasant type pain, and that can, you know, reduce somebody's pain signals or improve range of motion. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna go to that scar, and I just want you to again test your range of motion before. That's really important. You can test anything you want: shoulder, forward bend, whatever it is, neck, and then you just go to that area and you just go to that scar and just stab the area a little bit. Nothing crazy. Okay, just go there, send a few little sensory signals here. And I know this sounds so simple and so easy, but trust me, like, this is sometimes what you need to do with certain people to get them out of pain. Just doing this for a little bit, and then you can again retest your range of motion. This is really interesting stuff that you'll see with a lot of your clients. Okay. And then the last one that I want to share with you guys is just a simple coordination / cerebellum drill that I like to use with a lot of my clients, because the cerebellum is involved in so many different things, right? The cerebellum is involved in motor control and coordination of movement. It's involved in a lot of great things, and the better we can also like use the cerebellum to coordinate movement, the better oftentimes also the pain output will be. Okay, so what I want you to do here is I actually want you to just stand or sit, whichever you prefer. When I sit, you can see me a little bit better. And what I want you to do is I want you to use one foot, use one hand. You need to do this on the same side. Okay, this is important. And what I want you to do is I want you to do a big circle with your, we're going to use the non-dominant side. So if you're right-handed, you want to do this on the non-dominant side, so the left side. So we're going to do a big circle with the left foot. And then simultaneously, I want you to do a counterclockwise circle on the hand. Okay? And I mean, if you're doing this now, this is something that not a lot of people can master. Just try your hardest. Usually it helps if you just go really slow and then you kind of just combine both. But for some people, this will take some time. But even if you can't do it, just the sole act of trying to make it happen is going to stimulate the cerebellum. Specifically in this case, we're actually stimulating the lateral part of the cerebellum, which is actually doing with hands and feet. Okay, and you just want to do this for a little bit. And then again, you want to retest your range of motion, see how far you can go, shoulder, neck, whatever it is. Okay. Again, what I really want you to take away from this is, in this case, we're working more on, yes, we're getting some input, obviously, but we're also working on the specific brain areas that make the decisions and that actually produce these outputs. Okay. And you will laugh, but oftentimes when you just do simple drills like that with your clients, like they're gonna actually have a hard time, but they're also gonna oftentimes improve their range of motion really, really fast. Okay. So yeah, I really hope this was helpful, guys. Like I said, I just really wanted to share some insights and share some light in terms of what you can do when it comes to pain, when it comes to understanding pain, what can you do with pain, and then obviously I wish we could talk about more in depth about different assessments that you can use for your clients on the neuroscience. So the way I do this in real life is I won't just pick any random drills and then hope for the best. I will actually guide my clients through specific neuro assessments. Then we pick specific drills based on their results, and then we just basically structure that into a training program.